Good morning, everyone. How is everyone? Thumbs up? So? Very good. How many people are joining us today? I see something of a classroom full. We'll see if more people will be joining us in the next minute. We are recording this session, so some of you will be joining us asynchronously today. Understanding that the time difference between Taiwan and the US can make it a bit prohibitive for some of you to join us live. But without further ado, we're going to get started. My name is Kara Schrader. I'm one of the Central Region TEFL advisors. And in a few moments, we're going to introduce our speakers for our workshop today to you. Our workshop today is about TESOL. We're going to give you an overview, a crash course, especially for those of you who have not taught English necessarily. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable or at least have an understanding of what is about to come your way when you come to Taiwan. We are doing this as a joint session between the Eastern and Central region. So joining us today are advisors from both of those regions, as well as our program coordinators for helping with the recording and with the flow of our workshop, for which we are very, very grateful. So in the chat box, if you can, while we ease into this workshop, tell us where you are coming from. If you can take a moment and share with us where you are right now, love to hear from you. From Pittsburgh. Aisha, where's your kitchen? Oh my goodness, from all over the US. It looks like we have just about every time zone in the US here. Mountain Time, Eastern, Taipei. That would be a couple of us. Wow, from all over. We're so happy that you could join us, especially knowing that a lot of you, while it's good morning for us here in Taiwan, it's good evening to you. So we hope that this is an interesting and interesting workshop for you and well worth the time. So just to give you, as I said before, we're coming at you from the Eastern and Central regions of Taiwan. If you're with the Central region, that means you're in one of 4 sites: Taichung, Changhua, Yunlin, or Chiayi. And if you're coming from the Eastern region, you're coming either from Ilan, Hualien, South Hualien, or Taidong. So hopefully one of these sites looks familiar to you, but I just wanted to show you on a map when we talk about Central and Eastern regions, what we mean by that. Quick little introduction. I'm going to introduce myself, and then each of our advisors who will be presenting today will take a moment to introduce themselves as well. I'm a longtime English teaching professional. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, which is painfully long. No, it's not been painful whatsoever. I started my career in the Peace Corps in Russia and have spent a lot of time in that domain, having revisited about 4 years ago as a response volunteer in Ukraine, where I did teacher training. Before coming to Taiwan last year, I was an English language fellow in Mexico, where I did teacher training. And last fall, I've been here, I'm a second year advisor. So last fall, because of COVID, we had some program changes, as well as you're experiencing now. And so much like you, we'll be going into classrooms in Taiwan. So we're us advisors who were here last year, and I was in Kaohsiung. So that lent a lot of unique perspective into this work that we do collectively. I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague, Tom. If Tom, you can take a few moments to share about yourself.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Tom Bechkahazi, and like Kara, I've been doing this for about almost 20 years. I've spent time in Japan, as you can see from the slide here. Right now I live in Arizona, in the Phoenix area, where I've been teaching at university for about 4 or 5 years. And prior to that, I was in Okinawa, Japan. I've done teacher training in many different contexts, most recently online. I probably haven't taught an in-person class since 2019, I want to say. So I'm looking forward to being in person with human beings again. So I can't wait to meet you guys. And yeah, if you have any questions, please contact me at any point through the line group, or I think our email addresses show up at some point. So don't hesitate to send me an email.
Thanks, Tom. Our next advisor to introduce herself is Effie, also at the Central Region.
Hi everyone, I'm Effie. I'm currently in Taipei and I'm originally from Taiwan. I'm a first-year advisor, really excited about this opportunity. My background is in TESOL. For the past decade or so, I've been teaching in higher ed, but I do have a lot of experience with teaching English as a foreign language, as a second language, and to speakers of other languages. So great to be here and excited to see all these participants.
Thanks, Effie. Our next advisor to introduce herself is Megan from the Eastern Region.
Hello, my name is Megan Gilmore, and as Kara said, I will be working mostly with the Eastern Region. I will be based in Taitung, but traveling a lot up and down the Eastern Coast. I'm originally from Illinois, and I've also been teaching in some capacity or teacher training for about 12 or 13 years. I've lived and studied and taught in several different countries and contexts, and I've been in Taiwan almost 8 years. Part of that was studying Chinese, and part of that, most of that has been teaching everyone from 5-year-olds to 75-year-olds. So a wide range of different experiences, and most recently, like Kara, I was also teaching at a public school last fall as an advisor, and I was in a junior high. So if any of you are placed in a junior high and have some problems that are specific to that or some questions, feel free to contact me too, even if you're not in my region. Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Thanks, Megan. And lastly, but not least of all, we have one more advisor from our Eastern Region to introduce herself, Ting Zhu.
Thank you, Kara. I am Ting, and my Chinese name is Ting Ru. I will be working with Megan in the Eastern Region. Before coming to this position, I was a mobile English classroom teacher. So we traveled all over Taitung, visited almost every school. With a big bus. So that's a picture that you can see of me teaching with one of our buses. And before that, I was at FOTA. This is another program of Fulbright that sends language teachers to the States to teach their own language. So I spent a year, almost a year in University of Miami. It was a very fun year, interesting place to be. I am originally from Taipei. Now I live in I'm based in Taitung, but like Megan, I will be traveling to Hualien and Yilan, and hopefully some of the other cities to meet you. My background is in education. I had a master's degree in curriculum and instruction that I am very passionate about. So if there's anyone who's also interested in curriculum design, I would love to talk more about that with you. I have taught or worked in not just in Taiwan, but I spent some time in the San Francisco area and Kalizawa in Japan. Recently, I have been doing a lot of pottery, making my own bowls and plates. It's also a very nice hobby to have in Taitung when everything is relatively slow paced. So when you visit, we can have some fun doing pottery together. And of course, any Taiwanese related issues, recommendations, feel free to shoot me a message. I'll be more than happy to help. And excited to finally meeting you, most of you all online, and look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you, Ting. I'm going to be coming to visit you and do pottery with you soon.
Yay!
So now that you've had a brief introduction to all of us advisors, hopefully you feel a little bit more confident that you're in good hands, that we're here to help guide you in this pedagogical adventure that you're about to embark on. So today is really going to be focused on that piece of what does it mean to be in this world of TESOL? What does TESOL even mean? So just before we get started, a few things that we ask of you, and it seems most of us are already doing this. Please keep your cameras on. This is our best chance of getting to see you. And if you can, keep your mics off unless you're sharing with us, with the group. Please utilize that chat box. If you have questions that come up, this will help us to answer and address those. And any materials that we introduce, including this PowerPoint, we're going to be uploading to our region-specific Google Classroom. So you'll be seeing this later today in the Central Region Google Classroom, as well as in the Eastern Region Google Classroom. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. So just as a glance for today, we are obviously doing this workshop. We also have an assignment in Google Classroom, speaking of which, to explore Taiwanese English textbooks. So there should be a link that helps you to become more familiar with some of the most popular textbooks that we frequently see in the classroom. A lot of English classrooms, as we'll talk about more in our workshop today, utilize a textbook of some sort. So the sooner you can become familiar with that, I think the bit more confident you will become in understanding some of what might be taught in the English classrooms here in Taiwan. Tomorrow, we're going to have another workshop. We'll be back, but this time we'll be addressing lesson planning, and we'll have another assignment for you in which we're going to be asking you to write your own lesson plan. Not to worry, we're going to have an overview of that process, so hopefully it won't seem as daunting and a bit more digestible and hopefully easy to do. We have other workshops coming up in the weeks to come, addressing things like classroom management, approaches to teaching and activities, so diving more into the textbook. We'll also be addressing this good old acronym, which we'll be introducing to you more in depth today, called CALEAL, which is very closely tied to content-based instruction. So we'll explain a little bit more what that means later on, as well as a future workshop as part of this orientation series on co-teaching, since that's a lot of what your work will be in cross-cultural communication. So things to be looking forward to with dates to come. All right, without further ado, I'm going to let Tom take it away. So Tom, I'm going to stop sharing. Is that what you need me to do so you can get in here?
Yes, please. Thank you, Kara.
You bet.
Okay, so I'm going to start sharing here. Okay. Okay. So can everyone see this Pear Deck screen? Okay, if you can, good. If not, somebody please let me know. I'm going to copy and paste this link. Okay, thank you, Ruben. I'm just going to copy and paste the links into the chat really quickly, so I might just jump around here for just a second. You can click on that link, or you can just type joinpd.com into your browser window here. I see somebody's already connected. I'm just going to pop back over here for a second and put the join code in there as well, and then I'll just stay here. So I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to connect. Again, you can go to joinpd.com, and then it asks for the join code. I think it asks for permission at some point, and you can just click yes, and then enter QJPYSS. And I can see there's about 34, 35 folks connected. So I'm going to get started in just a second. And you'll still be able to join at any time by going to joinpd.com. And you should see this join code displayed in the corner of my screen. So I'm going to get started here. Okay, so we're going to start with TESOL terminology. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly. This is just an overview of acronyms that you'll run into as TESOL professionals. Some of them you'll become really familiar with if you decide to pursue a graduate degree at some point in the future. So, oh, and if you want to get a hold of me for anything, you can always just reach me at this email address down here, or again through our line group. And as you can see up here, if you get disconnected, you can always go back to joinpd.com and enter this join code. All right. So the first thing I'd like to do is start by asking you what you already know about TESOL. For example, what does the acronym TESOL stand for? So you can type your answers into the chat, and you don't just have to answer this question. You could type other things too. And I'll give everybody just a few moments, and then I'll show responses. Responses are anonymous, so don't worry about having your name attached to the answer. Okay, looks like a lot of responses are coming in. So I'm going to share these. Let's just take a look. Okay, yeah, looks like you guys are, yeah, teaching English to speakers of other languages. So yes, that is what TESOL stands for. Anything else besides, oh, nice. I like that someone tried to draw the answer. Oh, look at this. Someone used L1, awesome. Okay, L1 means first language, all right? Okay. Okay, good. So most of you just wrote what you think TESOL stands for. Perfect. Yeah. And remember, I think the first person, yeah, teaching English to speakers of other languages, TESOL. So there we go. All right, so let's keep going. The first acronym that you may run into is CEFR. It's not KEFR. I mean, maybe somebody pronounces it KEFR, but I've only heard it pronounced CEFR. That's the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And depending on, again, what you pursue after your experience here in Taiwan, you're going to run into this a lot when you look at, well, almost everything. Curriculum design, lesson planning, textbook writing. I mean, you name it, CEFR has some hand in it. Even though it does say European, just speaking from experience, I know that in the different American contexts I've worked in, this pops up a lot. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not sure how applicable it is to our experiences in Taiwan, but it is common to run into CEFR. All right, so I have a question for everybody. Why do you think it's important to have a common framework of reference for languages? And again, notice that I don't say for English, right? This applies to all languages. Why do you think it's important to have a common framework of reference for languages? How does it help us as educators? How does it help our students? Okay, so let's take a look. Learning and evaluation can be standardized. Okay, communicating properly. Interesting. Base comparison between languages. All right. Can gauge how fluent someone is in that language. Cross-cultural communication is possible. Yeah, excellent. Helps to provide a baseline from which all educators can work. Okay, good, good. A lot of talk about baseline, create objectives. Okay. I'm really happy to see all of these answers because it means that you're already ahead of the curve. All right, so we're going to go over this next one. I'm actually not going to really go over it that deeply because my colleagues will talk about it later, but you're going to hear this constantly. You've probably already been running into this acronym. CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning. This is something that I wasn't that familiar with until I started working with my colleagues who are second-year advisors. But this is really, really, really important. And I'm just going to show you here. You can see what it means. And then we'll go into it in more depth later. So let's keep moving on. So here we go. Big acronyms in the TESOL world. ESL, EFL, ENL. It's important. Well, I think I might be giving you the answer to the next question, so I'm not going to say anything. But you can see that there is a distinction between English as a second language, English as a foreign language, and then English as a new language. Okay. So I'm wondering, which one do you think applies to your roles in Taiwan? Which one applies to Taiwan's education goals, bilingual education goals? Okay, and let's take a look at the question here. Why do you think we need to distinguish between ESL, EFL, and ENL? Why is that important? You guys are fast. Look at how quickly these responses are coming in. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, this is one of those beautiful TESOL words, agency. Whoever wrote this gets an A+. Especially if you go into graduate work, you're going to read a lot about agency. Very, very important. Okay, yeah, of course. In some countries' cultures, English may be more common. Absolutely. I mean, in the United States, most programs are ESL programs. Okay, this is an excellent answer. Students with different language learning backgrounds have different learning needs. At some point, if you haven't already been exposed to differentiation, you will be. And this is just a great summary of that concept. Yep, takes into account the different backgrounds of language learners, contextualize. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, again, thank you everybody for contributing your responses. Okay, absolutely, diversity. Yes, third, fourth, etc. languages, absolutely. Okay, let's keep going. So I've always heard this pronounced ELL, but I've learned recently that this can also be pronounced L. So I guess it depends on where you're exposed to this acronym, but it can either be, you can either say L or ELL. I've always just said ELL. This is often how you will hear students in ESL or EFL programs referred to. And a lot of literature, we'll talk about ELLs as well. Okay, so we're going to keep moving on. L2, I think someone in the chat or in one of those answers said L1, and that is your first language. So L2 is your second language. Okay. So I want to just take a moment to see what's your L2 or L3 or L4 or your L1 or your L5, whatever. I'm just curious. I'd like to see what kind of diverse linguistic background we're looking at here. Okay, so let's see. Oh, French, English, Mandarin, Hebrew. Fantastic. Tagalog, Spanish, French, Malayalam, Mandarin, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish. Look at this. Wow, Latin. Excellent. English, Mandarin, Chinese, Spanish, German, Mandarin. Wonderful. See, this is why being a language teacher is one of the coolest jobs in the world, because look at just the wonderful diversity on display here. Wow, fantastic. So my family background is Hungarian. I don't see anybody, I don't see any Hungarian in here. But that's not necessarily surprising because really the only people who speak Hungarian are Hungarians. But very cool. Okay, excellent. All right, so next is SLA. If you run into somebody with a bit of a sense of humor, you might hear this pronounced slay, and you can really run with that if you want. Like, you know, yes, I slay. But this is probably one of the more formal terms you'll run into in the literature, especially, again, in graduate programs, second language acquisition. So there's a huge body of work, and it's always growing, and it touches on psychology and oh my gosh, I mean, the list is endless. And SLA has its fingers in so many different pies. So yeah, very common term in the TESOL world. And now we get way more local. We're looking at the FSE Fulbright context here, or the Taiwanese context, I guess, because ETFs are not involved with FSE, or Fulbright. So I'm sure you've already been hearing a lot of this acronym. Obviously, you're familiar with this one. I'm sure you'll become very familiar with this one, the ETFs. They are sort of the mentors, the OGs, the veterans, if you will, of the English teaching community here, and they are an excellent resource to which I hope you guys can reach out and just learn from. And yeah, just pretty self-explanatory, pretty standard acronyms. Again, you have access to all of this in the Google Classroom. So now, time to do some assessment. How many acronyms can you remember from what I just reviewed? Let's see. Okay, obviously everybody is going to have the most recent ones. Let's see. Wow, a lot of you have your caps locks on. Nice. Let's see if anyone tries to sneak in like an FBI or a CIA or something. No, you guys are good. Awesome. Wow, look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Okay, cool. All right. So, whoa. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Excellent. All right. So that, like I said, that's a very, very brief introduction to the world of TESOL, and it's really just about the acronyms, but educators love acronyms. So you will run into these time and again, in addition to a million others, and you'll become familiar with all of them. I'll leave you with just a couple of useful links. A lot of the information that I got here is from these sources. And of course, as always, if you have any questions, just send me an email and I would be more than happy to, or a chat online, and I'd be more than happy to clarify something. All right, and that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. So next we'll be having Effie present to us on the 6 principles in TESOL, and I'll let her introduce them.
Yeah, and I do need someone to share the screen for me, but I have the privilege of reviewing the article that was technically for homework. It was posted in the Google Classroom stream a few days ago in both Central and Eastern regions, called the 6 Principles of Exemplary Teaching, ... There's more to it. But I'm going to go through each principle. They seem pretty straightforward and like it goes without saying, but I think that you'll find something useful within each. I give some examples. Of course, we are missing a lot of context as you guys haven't started working as ETAs in your sites. Okay, so I think
sorry, I will check again the spell.
Yay! Visuals, please. While we're waiting for that, though, I'm just wondering if you guys want to go ahead and type something in the chat box, anything you remember from that article, if you read it or looked at it, if you remember any of the 6 principles. Anybody? Exit slips, awesome. Know your learners. Great. Nonverbals are key. Wow. This is awesome. Snowball game. Name aerobics. Cool. All right. Okay, so next slide. All right, so as you can tell by the visual, they are listed P1 through P6. So again, if I could just ask you guys to quickly, you can just identify it by P number, which principle actually resonated with you the most, and maybe just a quick why. This could come from your experiences with teaching, if you've had teaching experience, with tutoring, or your own language learning experiences. So a principle that really resonated with you. For me, it's P6. P4, hardest but most important. P4, P2, P6, another P6. P1, oh. Wow, a lot of variety, which is good. Connection individually is huge, I agree. Adaptation and improvisation in real time, yeah, we're gonna cover that as well. Thank you, good warm up. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so we're gonna talk about knowing your learners, and that is really the individual attention and the homework, the little bit of homework that you have to do to get to know your learners. And of course, this is gonna require time. It's gonna require familiarity over time, and it is gonna require a certain confidence on your part, especially when it comes to just learning the names of your students, if they don't have English names, and you'll need to, over time, learn how to pronounce Chinese names. Any other anticipated challenges with knowing your learners, if you can imagine the context that you'll be working as ETAs? Anything you can anticipate? Like maybe how do you get to know younger learners well? It's a lot different than getting to know older learners or adult learners, because a lot of times you can just ask directly and talk like an adult, right? Just curious what some anticipated challenges might be to knowing your learners. Connecting to students from a different culture is definitely harder. Yeah, less shared experience, limited amount of time. Yes, generational differences. I can certainly relate to that. These are all awesome. Okay. Language barriers. Yeah, I think it's important to anticipate these challenges and be able to share and talk about them. I mean, as an educator who's been teaching for a long time, I'm constantly challenging myself, constantly learning. I've made the mistake of mispronouncing names, or right off the bat asking, what is your English name? I've made that mistake several times before. Okay, great. So as much as you can to sort of know the context that you're entering, and know that it's going to take a little bit of time to know your learners, but in the long run, that is absolutely worthwhile, and it's going to make a more meaningful experience for you as well. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So creating conditions for language learning. So you yourself have probably had to learn a second language, third language, or had to, be challenged with what is your mother language. Myself, I was born in Taiwan, but I didn't grow up using as much Chinese as I could have. So I've had to kind of learn, relearn, and also challenge my own identity as a Chinese speaker. So what does that mean to be both American and Taiwanese? So I think anytime you can share your own language learning experience, or little tidbits about yourself as a person, as a learner, is going to be worthwhile for students. And also modeling positive language, calling things challenges instead of problems, avoiding negative language as well, so avoiding things like wrong or bad. And then, as someone mentioned in the warm-up, nonverbal communication, that's so important, especially with younger learners, enthusiasm, eye contact, smiling, body gestures, all that good stuff. So there's a checklist on the next slide that kind of shows you what this could look like in detail when you're entering a classroom environment and you want to foster a welcoming environment. So next slide. Thanks. So just a quick checklist, a visual that I wanted to include in there. This might look different for everyone and it might differ depending on the context. Your LET or homeroom teacher might already have some sort of system or checklist in mind. So it's important for you as an ETA to communicate that prior with your co-teacher. All right, and then principle 3. So designing high quality lessons for language development. So we're going to be talking about objectives a lot. I'm not going to go in too much depth, but it's really important to have learning goals, objectives in mind, and then those lead to outcomes. So I think today we're going to talk a little bit more about formative assessments aligned to objectives later on. I don't want to go too deep into this, but basically, if you can remember from your college courses, these were all listed in the various syllabi that you had for courses. So the students will be able to, the SWABAT. Okay, so it's important not only to set objectives, but to plan ahead and to envision the types of tasks, activities, homework, anything that you include in your teaching should be aligned to those. Another aspect to Principle 3 is planning for multiple delivery methods, multiple modalities, so that your students can learn through a variety of tools. Okay, so you as a teacher being prepared to use different tools, different things that appeal to different learning styles. So things that would be kinesthetic, things that would be both visual, so not just reading and writing tasks, but also listening, speaking, and be able to vary those and align them to your objectives. Something that you'll also encounter in TESOL is the 3 Ps. So presentation, so that would be like presentation of a grammar concept or vocabulary, practice, and then production, which would be the activity. So these 3 are sort of recursive. They're, you could repeat them in sequence. It really depends. I need context here to really give you an example, but if you can just kind of think of every lesson having these 3 components, kind of like a recipe, and to be able to vary those with different modalities. So different ways to present a concept, different ways to practice, and then different ways to produce what you're teaching, not just repeat after me, but different ways for students to actually show the product or result of what you want them to learn. Okay, next slide. All right, adaptation. This was also something already mentioned in the warm-up. So this has to do with you're checking in with students during the lesson and not just after. So little examples or tools that might be effective that was covered in the article are things like thumbs up or 5 fingers approach to check for student comprehension, as opposed to yes or no. So if someone can just, or anyone can just type in the chat box, what might be problematic with just asking for yes or no? Like, yes or no, do you understand? What might be better about the thumbs up or down or 5 fingers approach? 5 fingers would be like a range. Okay, you can call on a specific learner. Students might be intimidated by yes or no. Yeah. let's say someone only, exactly. So with 5 fingers, they might be able to put up 2 fingers or 3 fingers. More of a gradient, yeah. Too much of a binary, I love this. Yeah, some may be embarrassed to say no, exactly. And when you're in person, it's, you know, it's going to be a lot different. We don't have the benefit of these anonymous sort of responses like we had with the Pear Deck. All right, this is awesome. You guys are engaged. Okay, screen sharing can be a little bit challenging here. Vocalizing thoughts is very intimidating, while utilizing body language might get students to open up more. Yeah. Okay, so just in general, thinking about little ways you can check for understanding and comprehension during your lesson delivery and being able to adapt and adjust to that. And you'll get better over time too. Okay, next slide. Okay, so number 5 is really an expansion from number 4, the monitoring and continual assessment that happens. It's ongoing, not just towards the end of a lesson, like when you have a test. Formative assessments, there are many examples. We will cover more in the TESOL overview and then also in tomorrow's workshops, yes. Formative assessments are typically low stakes. They are supposed to be, you know, they're not supposed to be intimidating for students, and sometimes they can be fun. So things like that would be like, I'm trying to think, I've spent a lot of time teaching in higher ed, so this would be something like a first draft of an essay, okay? Or when your teacher does, you know, some kind of warm-up activity connected to review or something that's leading to a bigger assessment, things like that. Exit tickets, I saw that in the comment box. So this would be something you would have students write on a little piece of paper that they turn into you, kind of like a midpoint, you know, check-in or evaluation or survey. So it depends on what you're asking for. So this could be just a question about something in the lesson. It could be a fun little, you know, what do you remember from, you know, X or Y? Again, missing some context here. Okay, and then providing timely feedback, that's important. I teach writing, so primarily writing at the college level. So it's important. It's always been important to me to return papers on time and make sure that there's not too much turnaround time between the formative and summative assessment, what students are getting back. So feedback, constant feedback. Okay, next slide. And then this one has been the most relevant, or it has resonated with me the most recently, is the engaging and collaborating within a community of practice. So whether or not you decide teaching to become your professional career, it's important, you know, anytime you participate as part of a group or community, to engage with your colleagues, to share, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, and to be able to collaborate. So I think this is really important. And we as advisors, you know, we're always here to sort of be, you know, your beacons for that, and your friends too, really. So it's a friendly community, and I think it's important to check in and communicate with your co-teachers, with us, and then also to participate in workshops like you are today, and to maintain curiosity as well. Other ideas for how you can increase this, looking ahead for the year, and maybe not just within your school community, but with, you know, the town you're going to be living in, with being in Taiwan on a whole. So what are some ways you can engage more deeply with your environment, with the context that you're in? You can type it in the chat box. Any ideas? Yeah, groups and events outside of school, clubs if the school has any. Learn the language, yeah. Awesome. join teacher sports and befriend other teachers. Yeah, these are all great ideas. And again, I'm going to reiterate, definitely reach out to your advisors, even if we're not living in the region that you're placed at. Certainly reach out to us and we'll meet you all in person at a certain point. All right. And then next slide, showcasing student work to the larger community. I like that. Next slide. Use social media. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and pop some links in the chat box that this slide is showing. So if you want sort of like a quick guide, there's a 6 principles visual guide. It's about 4 pages. It's like an infographic and it's based on the article that was posted. So it kind of goes through each again, but with bullet points and more concrete examples. So if you wanted to, you could just refer to that. I found it helpful. And then an article from Edutopia called 7 Smart, Fast Ways to Do Formative Assessment. I believe Megan's going to talk more about this today, but I think it's important to, or tomorrow. Thanks, Kara. But I think it's important to know about it now. Yes, tomorrow. And then I also left, just so you know, the TESOL International Organization, and you can just Google this. It's sort of the premier kind of global professional organization resource for us TESOLers. And that is all I have for now. Thanks for listening. And thank you for all the comments in the chat box. It really helps to see that you're engaged.
All right. Thanks so much, Effie, for that. We're going to take a short little break. During the break, I'm going to have you go to, there was a sheet, a handout that was shared in both regions' Google Classrooms. And I encourage you to pull this up during the break. And here, let me show it to you really quickly. So this handout will be helpful for taking notes in the next part of the session. Let's do a 5-minute break. If we can come back at like 22 after, whatever hour it is by you, that would be great. We'll see you in about 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you've had enough time to get something to drink, move around a little bit. Now that we've given you the language of TESOL and have talked about some of the overarching principles that really guide the work that we do in the classroom, we're going to start in this second half of our workshop to narrow this down a little bit more into how this applies to the Taiwanese context. I'm still going to be a little bit in the theory part of things, but as we move towards the end of our workshop, understand that we will be talking more specifically by the end of our time today about what you can expect and see in the Taiwanese schools, and a lot of commonalities across the ETA experience in that. What I want to launch into in my, when we talk about it, methods and approaches, if you have that handout that was shared with you in the Google Classroom, this will be helpful for taking notes because a lot of what I'm going to share with you are sort of details that, as I talk about them, may be a little bit difficult to keep track of. So the handout is really meant to be a guide or a tool. If you have it printed out and you want to use that as a tracker, that's great. If you just want to have it in mind as you jot down notes, that's helpful too. If you're good at just remembering and recalling, that works as well. None of that is homework, okay? Just a tool to help guide you in this next part. If you take a look at that, how many methods or approaches do you see listed in that particular handout? And you can write that in the chat box. I'll go back to this. Yeah, 10, right. So that's a lot. And I can assure you, you probably won't be dealing with all 10 of these in your experience as ETAs. So we really are going to focus on, I'm going to focus on those approaches and methods that we see most commonly in Taiwanese classrooms, as well as, I should say, Taiwanese English classrooms, as well as what we see maybe expected of you, even if it's not actively implemented. So without further ado, I have two questions to ask you. I'd like for you to chat in the, to respond in the chat box. And the first is, how have you learned language? So take a moment and just think about how you might answer that question. Drills, repetition, parents, dialogues, tasks, real world experience or immersion, talking with native speakers, classmates, games, finding patterns, movies, immersive experiences, storytelling, improv, memorization, role playing, yeah, trial and error. So you can see there's a lot of different ways we can learn language. And I want that to be sort of the takeaway with our time today, is that there's not one singular approach or method that is the perfect one for learning language, but it's important to be aware of them because they can all be tools that we can utilize in the classroom. And the next that I have for you is, how do you teach language? So maybe you haven't much experience with this, but if you do, how have you done it? And how, if you haven't done it, how do you imagine doing it? PPP, repetition, with patience. Absolutely. Writing practice. Meet students where they are at and build from there. Positive reinforcement, music, skit scenarios, making language relevant to students' contexts, conversing about videos and verbs, lots of practice, growth mindset, engaging activities, not just textbooks, class collaborative activities. Lots of ideas here. And this is great. As you can see, none of these fit just one particular method or approach, or you will see, I should say. So understand what I share with you is a little bit of the evolution of language learning, not just English learning or teaching, and how that, and the things that we can pick apart from it. So I'm going to be skimming through some parts of these approaches, but you will find them in the Google Classroom. I will be sharing materials for all of them. If you are particularly nerding out in this section and want to dive a little deeper into those parts. really my objective for today is for you to understand a little bit more about the evolution of language teaching, but really specific to understanding that in the Taiwanese public school context. So when we are utilizing, or as I'm sharing with you, things that I want you to be thinking about as I share these particular approaches is think about what are the distinguishing characteristics of them? What would you see students doing in a classroom where this approach is applied? And what would you see teachers doing? Each approach is going to have advantages and disadvantages. As Effie pointed out, we are trying to meet students and adapt our lesson delivery to be where they're at. So thinking about which approaches help us to do that best, it may mean that we have to integrate some of these ideas together. So without further ado, let me introduce to you grammar translation. This is kind of the hallmark classic way that language has historically been taught. It was used initially to teach Latin and Greek, and it's continued on today. We even see it in a lot of classrooms here in Taiwan still. And a lot of it is about presentation of grammar, lots of lists of words, and then lots of exercises around translating and grammar. And as you can imagine, that means that a lot of that work is emphasizing the modalities of reading and writing, and not so much speaking. And a lot of vocabulary is just taught in lists of isolated words. So not necessarily words that seem steeped in context or relate to the interests or the needs of students in that moment. And one thing to keep in mind is very often this technique is taught or when we're doing language instruction using this particular technique, it's in the mother tongue. So in fact, many of you might see this when you come to Taiwan, which is soon, so soon. You might start to see that a lot of English instruction is actually given in Mandarin. You're going to see also a lot of times that grammar is emphasized over content. And as I mentioned, because there isn't this value of relevance of what is taught, there's a bit of a disconnect between the content and theme. So if you'd like to see this more in action for each of these, I've also found some videos that really help to demonstrate, and you can see this in action. Just because of the limitations of our time, I won't be necessarily showing you in the scope of this workshop, but I want you to have access to those if you feel that that would be helpful to you. Okay, so there's another approach called direct method and natural approach, and this has a lot of aspects. You see I'm flying through it. This is one of those that I recommend taking some time later on and looking through and diving in a little bit more. But it's not one that you probably are going to live in or see a lot of here in Taiwan. Rather, you might see more of some of these elements from the audiolingual method. So this was a technique that was popular in the 1950s, post-World War. The world is becoming a bit more global. We're starting to see this need to interact with each other. And this was kind of developed out of the Army method. So understanding that we need to have a more oral-based approach to language learning. We can't just translate everything and keep things in reading and writing. We have to know how to speak language too. So while this does practice grammar structures and sentence patterns, this is done via pronunciation and intensive oral drills. So we start to see the drilling emerge here. We start to see a lot of more emphasis on perfect pronunciation. Repetition is really emphasized using this method, and it's really seen as a way to develop habits of language learning. So that is sort of the philosophy behind it. And you see I have a little parrot there because it's a lot of parroting. It's a lot of mimicry and memorizations of how to say things. So rather than it be so much about critical thinking and applied thinking, it's more about repetition and kind of creating sort of muscle memory around words and phrases and pronunciation. So a lot of new material will actually be presented in dialogue form, and you'll see that this features heavily in a lot of the English textbooks that are used in classrooms here in Taiwan. And there isn't a lot of grammatical explanation provided, and this is also true. Grammar is presented, but it's not necessarily explained in detail in a lot of the textbooks that kids use here. There is a lot of importance attached to pronunciation. So you'll see also in a lot of textbooks, they speak to having phonics or some sort of pronunciation drills. In this particular method, however, ideally, there's very little use of the mother tongue by the teacher anyway. And you might see this in varying degrees in actual use. There is a lot of emphasis here because of the repetition and the need of sort of perfecting pronunciation, that there's a lot of emphasis on no mistakes, having error-free utterances. And that, take that for what you want, but that is something that you will also encounter here, that there's a lot of emphasis on correction in the classroom. Again, another model lesson that you can find is at this website. Again, all of these materials will be shared in Google Classroom for you, so hopefully it'll be easy for you to connect to those resources. So another popular, as we moved through the 20th century, we started, if you think about the 60s and sort of what's happening politically and worldwide, sort of this more peaceful form of language learning starts to occur to kind of reflect the environment, what's going on. And we see this with methods such as the silent way. And again, I'm not going to speak too much of this because this is really not a technique that's used very much here in Taiwan, but it is a fascinating technique that uses these things called Fidel charts and other kind of fascinating tools. And we also see the emergence of this idea of suggestipedia, which really introduced the idea that language learning should be comfortable. What a concept, right? So in the 70s, this was developed, and it was the idea that we need to relax the human brain, that we need to infuse sort of pleasure in language learning. And doing that through different means. So really paying attention to the learning environment, injecting things like music. This is not something I want to spend a lot of time on either, but I do think that there are parts of this approach that you do see reflected in classrooms in general, and maybe something to keep in mind as a place for you to think about taking some of these ideas and putting them into practice. Okay. So this kind of, as we evolve, as you can see, generationally, we're moving away from this idea of just translating and writing, even though it's still used and in practice, we haven't gotten that far away from it. Other ideas about how we can learn language and make it a more pleasant experience start to emerge. And so we start to think, how about interaction? And we start to see this in the community language learning approach. This idea of authenticity and meaningful communication starts to inject itself. So I don't want to spend too much time here because actually you start to see in later methods and approaches that were developed, this idea continues. And one of these is TPR, total physical response. You're going to definitely find this a really useful technique to have in your back pocket. It's great for, what it does is infusing the idea of physical movement with language. So it's great for teaching verbs and things that are action or tangible nouns, countable nouns. And the ideas here is just about, again, movement, infusing movement with language and the sort of, if you get into a neurobiological processes, which we're not going to dive into here, there's a lot of extra connections are being made when we start to add this sort of kinesthetic aspect to language learning. It's also steeped in the idea that it should be stress-free, and it helps to infuse this idea of fun, and encourages our students to speak when they feel ready. So they have other means and tools to express their understanding through physical gestures and movements, but allows them a bit more room and space to start actually speaking and using language when they feel ready. And you can see more information or ideas around this. Again, for each of these techniques, I have a video for you. This takes us to task-based language learning. And this is a technique that you will definitely start to see a bit more in the classroom. I think there's a lot of the idea of this, and you might be actually tapped to lead activities that have this sort of focus. So again, here we have this strong idea that language should be authentic, and it should have a task to it. It should be attached to something meaningful or relevant to what our students need. If you're thinking of like more adult learners, there might be where we would see task-based learning might be visiting the doctor and having language to ask the doctor questions or understand how to fill out certain forms. For students, it could be things like ordering ice cream or asking a friend to play with them. So those are meaningful things to the students and appropriate to their age. And there's obviously language attached to doing those tasks that should be relevant to students. We really start to focus on this idea of outcome. So not just learning language to learn language, but that at the end of every lesson, students should have this thing that they should be able to say that is the manifestation, if you will, of the lesson's objective, its goal. So the resulting language that students now have. And it should be steeped in their ability to now perform this task. This idea is also really about how do we build oral fluency in language and really wanting to build student confidence. We often see that this is where students are most shy because it's in a way performative. It's hard to hide if you don't know how to say or speak something orally versus in writing or reading. So it's a more active modality. And we often start to see also the shift of teachers' roles in this. So here the teacher is more of a supporter, an inventor of tasks. This is kind of the fun job that we get to have in this role when utilizing this approach. This gives way to the communicative approach. And this you might hear a lot of. This is sort of the world that we live a lot in. And it's a bit more sort of umbrella-esque and encompassing. Idea here is really about, again, this idea of having real meaning and communication and being able to get across that meaning. So in a communicative approach, we're not so worried about correcting errors, but more of can we understand what's being communicated to us. Here, when learners are involved in this, we're kind of allowing them to make their own strategies in language learning rather than giving them to them of how they should do it. So we're kind of letting them deal a bit with some ambiguity and hoping and helping them to make some of those internal connections themselves with the idea then that they can retain some of this new language more. So a lot of when we're working within the communicative approach, the sort of activities that we engage in the classroom are going to be those that really are steeped in meaningful and real communication at all levels. It's really, again, steeped in the idea of developing skills like speaking, listening, reading, and writing, rather than systems. And this is a very key part of the communicative approach. It's learner-centered. So rather than it be chalk and talk, like I'm doing now with you, where the teacher is feeding information to students, we're developing activities where students get to make meaning out of the activity, meaning from language. And in doing that, we want to make sure we're incorporating authentic materials. So we're really trying to create as much of an immersive type setting and the communicative approach within the classroom as possible. That sounds like a wonderful goal. It's certainly much more challenging to do than it is to say. So easier to do than, or I should say, easier to say than do. You will probably find that this is an approach it's something that is really pushed. It's kind of one of the more current trends of approaches towards language learning. And it's probably the one that is a bit more grappling to deal with. And you may not see it necessarily used a lot in classrooms, though a lot of teachers may feel pressured to try to use it and may tap you to be the person who introduces or creates activities that utilize this method or approach. The last one that I want to introduce to you is one we've already referenced a few times in our workshop today, and that is CALEAL, the Content and Language Integrated Learning. This came about and is closely connected to content-based instruction. So this idea where content such as math or science or even just topics like the weather are married to language. And so we're not teaching these things as isolated subjects, but we are marrying them together. We're going to explain a little bit more about why this has become such a popular approach in Taiwan, but it's very much steeped in the idea of bilingualism. And this is something that's becoming more and more favored in Taiwanese schools. Content-based instruction you see mostly in an ESL context, so you might see this used more in US or native English speaking classrooms where we're teaching students who are new to English versus in settings like Taiwan or outside of native English speaking countries that want to utilize the content classroom as a way to also infuse language learning. We'll be using more CALEAL. So this is a word that your ears should start to peek at. Because it's something that you will definitely encounter, especially if you find yourself not in a strictly English classroom. Some of you might find yourselves paired with co-teachers who are actually content teachers. And this will be a particular method and approach that you will want to learn more about. And we will have workshops specifically on this, more than what we can do in the span of just 20 minutes here with you. So just understand that it's really about infusing language learning when giving content instruction. And so now that you've had a very brief introduction to these approaches, I'd like for you in the chat box to respond to the following. What characteristics do you value in language learning? Language games, learner-centered, so keeping it fun, interesting content, meaningful communication, real-life situation authentic communication, tactile, task-based, patience, communication focused. Oh, yeah, so you can see that a lot of these approaches that have been developed in more recent years really embrace a lot of the things that we value. We want to make language fun. We want to have it be relaxed as much as we can, take the stress out of it. We want to keep it light but meaningful. And we want to make sure that we have room for students to feel that there's a certain patience, that there's not the stress of you must learn all of these things and go. So these are sort of the ideals of these approaches. Now in the classroom, we may in a singular lesson, you may find that you're doing many of these different types of approaches or taking elements or characteristics from them. So there isn't necessarily going to be one that you live in all the time. Another question for you for the chat box is, which do you think will be the easiest to implement? And which do you think will be the hardest? Easiest, TPR, task-based. TPR easiest, communicative approach seems hardest. Okay, that's resonated by a couple of you. TPR easiest for young learners, hardest communicative. Easiest grammar translation, hardest task-based. Task-based also hardest, okay. TPR should be easiest. Part of what probably makes some of these easier than others is the amount of where we as teachers do our planning and where we're doing our instruction. So in a grammar-based or more traditional classroom, we don't have to do as much preparation as teachers. A lot of our work is within the lesson itself. Whereas in a communicative approach type of classroom, we're doing a lot of that planning and preparation outside of the lesson, so that within the lesson, we're having a more monitoring type role. And that can be what also challenges this work. Okay, one last question for you. Which approaches are you the most excited to learn more about and or use? Khalil, Suggestopedia. Everyone is on the Khalil bandwagon. Community language learning. Okay. I'm loving the enthusiasm for Khalil. Please keep that. Communicative, community language learning. Yay. I'm so excited that so many of you really love this idea of Khalil. And we'll definitely be getting more into it. Excellent. So if you take a look back at this handout, if you have it out in front of you elsewhere, the methods that we really highlighted here are the grammar translation, audiolingual method, kind of the more traditional ways of language learning. And these we see a lot in the traditional English classroom here in Taiwan, as well as with some TPR infused here and there. And probably where you're going to be tasked is not only in helping to continue those forms or approaches of teaching, but you might be also asked to come up with lessons that are more task-based or communicative or even Khalil-based. So these are in totality 6 of the approaches that you probably will be most exposed to and become most familiar with in your time as an ETA. Few resources here for you. Again, everything that I've shared in this PowerPoint, as well as more information on the approaches and methods that I did not cover, you'll find in Google Classroom later today for you for easy reference. So with that, I'm going to give the platform over to my Eastern Region TEFL colleagues, TEFL advisor colleagues, to tell you a little bit more about TESOL in the Taiwanese context.
Thank you, Kara. I can share my own slides. Hello, everyone. I am Ting, and Megan and I will be partnered on this workshop. We hope this will be, we're going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So besides me talking, at the same time, you can just keep the discussion going in the chat box, and we will try to respond to you if there's any questions or any comments that we might be able to give you. So my job is to share about the context in Taiwan, about teaching English in Taiwan and how this will look like for you. I'm gonna try to introduce this I break it down in smaller parts. As you know, we all are connected in some way, so the international context is important. But then I'm gonna break the different layers of context down about what's happening in Taiwan and what it might look like in your local schools. So a couple big ideas to know about is the pandemic. It's a very interesting timing that you're coming to Taiwan after 4 months of learning online, and for you to join them back in school. It would be really interesting to see what happens then. And then national-wise, I will mention two big national policies, a 12-year basic education policy and the 2030 bilingual initiative. And of course, each county has their own county policies and focus. So it's important for you to know the county demographics before or always keep an eye on that once you're in there. Then a basic introduction of kind of a general structure of the school. And then, of course, I'm not going to be able to tell you a lot about the class context that you will have to spend time and observe, but I will try to do my best. So first of all, before I start to introduce my slide, here are some questions. If you see the questions in the red box, those are the questions you can think about. And those are the questions that you can discuss in our chat box while I am talking. So international-wise, all the students and teachers, actually it's today. Today is the big day. It's the start of the new semester. It's a pity that you're not here yet, but don't worry, you'll be here very soon. So after 4 months of learning from home, lots of things have changed. The teachers are very used to using technology. Google Meet, that we're doing it now, Google Classroom. The teachers have been working so hard getting used to technology and kind of grading each assignment on Google Classroom. It's the efforts they spend were amazing. So, and of course, Kahoot. I don't know how many people have learned about this platform, but if you don't know about Kahoot yet, this is a very popular interactive platform teachers use to play games, review games mostly with their students. And of course, you are expected to wear a mask at all time in Taiwan, not just in school. I am mentioning this now because teaching with a mask on is very difficult. So you'll need some time to get used to that. I personally taught with a mask on for over a year, and it will be really difficult to breathe. So try to get used to that. And most schools have AC actually, but even if they do, they might not use it. There's a national-wide policy that we were trying to install AC in each classroom, but it's a work in progress. So it can get hot when you're here teaching. All right. So questions to think about actually, what has changed for them? Are they more familiar with the learning platform, or is the gap between between different level of learner even bigger right now. So these are some things you can keep in mind with. And what might be the challenges or advantages for you to join at this timing? Okay. And before we move on to our next slide, a couple questions for you. The first question is, do you know since which grade or which year do Taiwanese students start to learn English? Because of course in Taiwan, we're all learners of English. English is not our mother tongue. But do you know officially from which year? You can take a guess. First grade, okay, grade 1. Third grade. Yes. Very cool. Yes, officially third grade, but many people start way earlier. Ambitious parents send their kids to bilingual kindergarten and whatnot, and then so different starting point, but officially third grade. And that brings us to important national policies. The first one is the 12-year basic education. It was announced in 2014, but officially implemented only 3 years ago from 2018. So everyone is still getting used to this. The biggest change is that our compulsory education, the year of compulsory education were changed from 9 years to 12 years. If we break it down, we have 6 years of elementary, 3 years of junior high school, and 3 years of senior high. The senior high school years were not part of the compulsory education system until 3 years ago. For each period, this might be also something you want to know. It's 40 minutes per period for elementary school and 45 minutes per period for junior high kids. There's generally 7 periods a day, but schools usually extend the time by offering school clubs or after school curriculum. So you will find kids staying in school for a much longer time than from 7:30 to 4. As for our language curriculum, that is the things we're most related to, we start learning English from grade 3 and 4, and we only require 1 period per week for students. However, schools have that flexibility to add in more periods as part of their school special curriculum. So it's very common you see kids at least have 2 or more English classes each week. Besides Mandarin and English, we also are trying to do a big push on our mother tongue, different mother tongues and different native languages. So Taiwanese, Hakka, indigenous languages, and we also have Vietnamese for the new immigrants. So different languages, native languages that the students have. Schools are required to offer the native language lessons. So have this big picture. Now I would like to encourage the discussion in the chat box. Why do you think it's important for Taiwanese students to learn English? Why are Taiwanese students learning English? You can type in your answers in the chat box because that will be directly related to what we're going to talk about later. Okay, and this is another thing to get an impression on you. The 3 core values of this 12-year basic education is to encourage students to take the initiative and then engage in the public, and lastly to seek the common good. It's very vague, but basically it's trying to make the education more authentic. And to encourage more connection between real life and the lessons that they're taking at school. I put this here because if you know these 3 core values, you will impress your local teacher a lot, because these 3 words are repeated over and over again for the past years. And it will be very important for you to keep in mind while you plan your lesson as well, how you can achieve these core values with your co-teacher. All right, so I'm gonna see if there's any answers. Okay, I didn't see any answers yet about why we're learning English, but that's okay. A big reason is because of this policy. We have this 2030 bilingual initiative. Taiwan hopes to become a bilingual nation by 2030, which is very, very challenging. And we just announced this. So we're at the very early stage about on our way to become a bilingual nation. And how we are going to reach this goal, clear. And we were trying to recruit more bilingual teachers or foreign teachers, and that's why we also have this big increase on the ETA number as well. You're much needed here to encourage more interaction with the outer world, I guess. So CLIO will be a big focus. Some known benefits of CLIO. Basically, in the CLIO lesson, you have the content and you have the language. So these 2 have to go together. However, some challenges you can easily imagine is, for example, all the teachers here, they're all English learners. None of us is really, like for me as well, we don't grow up speaking English. So besides having to know our content, we have to know how to use a new language to teach it. That's a very big challenge for a lot of the content teachers, the subject teachers here. However, with this method of teaching, the benefits can include first, there's more collaboration between English teachers and subject teachers, and that you might play an important part in this as well, how you can assist other subject teachers to teach in English. And other benefits include a more diverse learning opportunity. It's very new and exciting, and because it's a big national policy. If the school is doing well with CLIO programs, they might have more students. And most importantly, I think for me, is if you make using English comfortable and normal, and they are not afraid of making mistakes, it can lower students' anxiety level when they speak up in English. We're very excited to know a lot of you are interested in learning more about CLIO. To be honest, everyone is still learning about this together, and everyone is trying to figure this out under a Taiwanese context. So don't worry once you look more into this, if you find it confusing, if you find very many different explanations, don't worry, it's just how it is right now. And so you can have your own way to interpret how you want to use this method as well. And keep in mind, your LETs, they are also learners of English. So when you're collaborating, I guess it's good to not assume everybody is very fluent when you're working with them. And so there are 3 things I can think of that you can do even while you're still figuring this out. At the same time, these are also the things that the local teachers have been trying to do at the same time. First is to encourage classroom English. A lot of the LETs are not comfortable speaking in English, actually. So as a first step, just to encourage more classroom English. And that includes turn to page 5. May I go to the bathroom? What time is it? Good job. Things like that, things you say in the classroom setting, not necessarily the content. And you will be very valuable to help to create a friendly English speaking environment. So, and besides that, besides speaking and teaching, it's also nice if you can help create an English-friendly campus that includes decorations, that includes maybe you can help the schools to make announcements in English. These little things you can do, they will all be very helpful as first steps achieving the bilingual goal. Right, so that's the nationwide context. When you come and when you get settled in your county, it would be helpful for you to know what your county is trying to do. Something interesting I noticed is that each county has really different educational goals and focuses. I have been in Taidong for the past year, and the big thing I noticed in Taidong is that they're trying to renovate all these bathrooms in different schools. You would be surprised if you when you visit the most remote schools in Taidong and how clean, how fancy the bathrooms are. You would be very surprised. I had to take off my shoes before I entered the bathroom, and there's always classical music, and everything is so clean. That's just a funny example of something I noticed that they're doing in Taidong, and your county might be doing something else. So make sure you get to know more about what they've been doing. And of course, I would say this for the Eastern region. A lot of the remote schools or schools that you're placed in, they're in the middle of a community, and sometimes it's an indigenous village. Or kind of like a small community. So the level of the community involvement will really make a difference in the school curriculum as well. And here it's a very good opportunity for you to see how the level of the involvement is and how you can participate in that. And then the next thing is also very common, I think, in Taiwan. A lot of the kids, if the parents can afford it, they are sent to cram schools after school. So it's also something Taiwan is kind of famous for, is the super long school hours and learning hours. Not just from 7:30 to 4. It's for some students, perhaps even to 9:30 at night. It's not only about learning, it also serves as a form of childcare for a lot of the parents, because parents work really late. So cram school is a way of childcare for them to make sure that their kids are doing something. In most of the cram schools, they offer English classes, and you find a lot of foreign teachers in cram schools as well. And that might result in very different levels in the same classroom. So you might enter your class and you find some kids are at a much higher level than the other kids. That's probably because they had extra help after school. So yeah, get to know the demographics and what's going on at your site. And you can start thinking about, we're going to talk about this later on this year, but about differentiated teaching. But you can start thinking about what you can do, something you can do to engage students of different levels. Moving on, we have the school context. This is relatively straightforward. In each public school, it's all the same. The basic admin structure is all the same. And it's important for you to kind of know this because you will need to know who they're referring to or who you can go to get help from. Of course, we have the principal. Then we have, under the principal, there are 5 different directors, academic affair director, student affair, general affair, accountant, and HR director. What you'll need to pay attention to are the ones I highlighted in deep red. Academic affair director will be in charge of all the teachers, the teaching, and classroom management and stuff like that. And underneath the academic department, there are usually 4 coordinators: teacher coordinator, admission, IT, and facility. If you need help with your internet setup or classroom facilities, you go to a facility coordinator. But I think who you will interact most with would be the academic affair director and the teacher coordinator. So next, I'm going to tell you how to say these 2 words in Chinese. You don't need to learn to say it, but just kind of have an impression of how it sounds. For director in Taiwan, we said 主任, 主任, and coordinator is 组长, 组长. So these 2 names, you're going to be hearing them a lot. Okay, other contexts that are useful to know, like Kara just mentioned, you'll find it very grammar translation heavy in Taiwan. Still, that's how I learned my English, actually, when I grew up. And but teachers are changing, and I have seen different methods in Taiwan as well. So don't be surprised to see grammar translation, but be open to using more different methods that you just learned and try to encourage a more diverse teaching with your co-teachers. Then the students are given a classroom number. In the past, we had really big classes, perhaps 30, 40 students in a class. Now, a lot of the class size is smaller, but they're still given a number. It just makes it easier for the teachers to manage. So if you have a hard time remembering their names, you can try to remember the numbers. Then in Taiwan, we change in elementary school, we change our homerooms every 2 years. So grade 1 and grade 2, they're together, and then they change the different homeroom and have different classmates. For your co-teacher, you might find them going to their homerooms to teach, or some of them, they have their own English classrooms. So this might be different based on the schools. For English names, it's common for teachers to give students an English name. When I was in school, now some teachers just use pinyin for their students' names, so they don't need to call. I don't need to be called Amy or Tina. That is not related to my Chinese name. I can be called as Tingru in some of the teachers' classrooms. And if the students have their indigenous names, they are also highly encouraged to use their own name. So English names now, they're not as necessary, but depending on different schools and teachers, maybe some teachers will ask for your help to give their students names. So be prepared for that. But also keep in mind that we try really hard to let the students have their own identity to not confuse them. So if they prefer to use their own name, just be open to that. Another context, this is actually a reason of why the teachers in the past didn't choose to just use the student's Chinese name in English, because when our Chinese names are spelled in pinyin, it's difficult to pronounce. So, for example, my name is Ting Ru, but when it's written down in the, actually, how can I explain this? In English, on my passport, it says Tingju. So if you don't know how to pronounce that, it will sound like Tingju, which is not really my name. So the things get confusing when it comes to spelling the Chinese name out. But that's because we have the pinyin system and we have the Bapama system. And Bapama system is what we are using in Taiwan. Pinyin system is what they're using in China. And so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but things can get confusing. Lastly, an example of a schedule of a day in school. That picture is actually quite, I think it's a classroom from a school in Taiwan. So classrooms are gonna look like that. Each kid has their own desk. Like I said, school starts from 7:30 to 4. In the morning, we have quite a long time, from about an hour for them to do their morning reading, story time. That's also when the schools would have school-wide assembly, or for the homeroom teachers to have their own time with their students. Then we have 4 periods in the morning and 3 periods in the afternoon. In the morning, we have a big recess, and after lunch, there's nap time. Usually, not usually, it's mandatory nap time in each school. So kids nap. It's interesting thing. We also want the kids to brush their teeth. So after lunch, you'll listen to this music playing, and when the kids hear that, they will all go out and brush their teeth. Then the cleaning time is 20 minutes in the afternoon. That's how they keep the bathroom really clean. Some schools even use nap time to clean their bathrooms. Then end of school is at 4. Okay, this is a quick summary and overview of some of the context in Taiwan. Before I finish, let's play a quick recap game. And I would also like to learn more about how you think at the end of the game. So I'm gonna copy and paste a link here in the chat. So everyone, please join in. When you come in, you will see, you'll be able to choose an avatar, then join the game. And then I'm gonna share this screen instead. Okay, well, we can see a lot of pandas, penguin, fox, giraffes. Okay, we have 16 people so far. So I'm gonna, in this game, you will be asked a few questions related to what I just said. So try your best. Okay, I'm just gonna start. If you want to join later, here's the code on the upper left. You can always join later. All right, let's go. Question number 1, what is Taiwan's goal for 2030? Remember to submit your answer. Okay, Sam, you're number 1. Good job. And question number 2, what is Cleo? This is a tricky one. leaderboard, Sam, Jacob, Kelsey, Cleo. Question number 3. How long is an elementary school class period? It's 5 minutes less than junior high. 40 minutes, correct. How long is a junior high school class period? This one should be very easy. Okay. This is a true or false question. Most affluent students. Same people on the leaderboard. Oh, Lily, you're number 3. Amazing. Congratulations, top 5 people on the leaderboard, and thank you for paying attention to my presentation. Before we finish, this is the first time we're meeting you all, so we would like to take this opportunity to know a little bit more about what you like to learn. So if there's anything you would like to know more about teaching English in Taiwan, please type in the box right now and share that with us. I think for advisors, we'll find it helpful as well. And you can just type in and post. Okay, interested in learning more about how COVID has affected. Yeah. Besides wearing masks, I think using technology is a big part that I noticed. More and more teachers are using technologies. So if you like some other people's ideas, you want to echo to their idea, you can just like their post, like this one. Know more about integrating TPR. That's very nice to know. Okay, how to assist them on a day-to-day basis. Games, behaviors to praise or avoid in the classroom. This is something you can talk with your co-teacher, because each teacher has different kind of standards. So it would be nice to get on the same page with them. Taiwanese folklore, fables. Oh, that's interesting. Yes, we can use those stories and teach as our materials. Watch more videos of LET. I hope that too. Okay. Nice. How to approach teaching a classroom of students who attend cram schools and students who don't. Yes, differentiated instruction is one way to do it, but mostly I think just pay attention to their reaction in the lesson would be really helpful to that. Okay. Well, thank you for all these wonderful inputs and ideas. The advisors are gonna look at these, and hopefully we can provide helpful assistance for the coming semester. And that is today's workshop. So, Kara, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just sharing now back to our slides here. Just give me one moment as we finish things up here. obviously, a lot of questions are coming through, and we really appreciate it. If there are more questions that come up, I encourage you to let us know. And one great way to do that is by reaching out to us via email, or we have set up line groups for our respective regions. So if you're in the Central region, the best way to join our Central Region ETA and Advisor group is by friending me online at CareBear520. If you're in the Eastern region, the best way to get added to the Eastern Region ETA and Advisor group is through Megan's line, which is GUMEIEN. Here is a list also of our email addresses, which we check regularly. So those are great ways to find us, as well as in Google Classroom. If you haven't friended us yet, we highly, highly, highly encourage you to do so. You're going to find that line is a big way that we communicate here in Taiwan, both socially and professionally. And it's one of the easiest ways that we'll be able to send out reminders and just communicate different things coming to be aware of. So please make sure that you join our groups, and keep in mind that we have assignments for today. Today's assignment is an opportunity for you to really become a bit more familiar with what the textbooks, some of the textbooks that are used commonly in English classrooms here are. So I encourage you to take time, if you have time, to look through those. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow at our next workshop on lesson planning. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everyone, or evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.